Down. We are live at Expert 35. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, and as promised, 35 different industries, expert from each industry. We're talking about the challenges, talking about the opportunities, and ways we can actually now invest. We're going to talk to Jennifer Johnson, one of our OG, I love bringing back the OG experts, Expert 28.
That's
Talking about real estate. Jennifer, thank you for joining us today.
Oh my God, this is, it's a dream come true. I just love being here. We could chat all day. Thank you for having me.
And I think we will, because you already have a couple of people like joining the conversation. So please put your questions in there. We're going to talk about the smart money. We're going to talk about where real estate is moving, primarily residential. Jennifer is a concierge realtor. Tell us a little bit of what that means, because the first time I heard it, I was like, "Ooh, that sounds cool." And then as you explain it more, I was like, "Oh my God, it totally." We need more. Like you are definitely a great service. Tell us what that means.
It sounds very fancy, but what it really means is that I book all the appointments. Like, for instance, we're closing today on a house, and we needed to paint it, and we needed to do new floors. I researched, I took care of all the back end stuff. So tomorrow, after we close tomorrow, they're going to start working on the house. So I've booked everything. My client is even out of town. And so she didn't have to touch one bit of this. And she didn't have to change her schedule. She didn't have to come back from work so if you need a painter, a plumber, or mover, I'll take care of all the back end stuff. You never
Nice. So you're not just the agent for the house, you're the agent for everything. You're remodeling, you're making sure that everything's taken care of. And especially nowadays, especially with COVID. I mean, that's even, and you were doing this before COVID. So let's be clear. This is like now even more necessary with COVID. But before COVID, man, I'm busy. I got the kids. I got this. I got that. Jennifer Johnson takes care of it. And one phone call. And you have a ridiculous network. I mean, plumber. I mean, give us just some of the people that you know, because I think that's what differentiates. A realtor is not, there's plenty of realtors that got their coursework and they do something else during the day. You're a full-time realtor, so you have a network. Tell me some of the people that you know in your network.
I know a great HVAC. I know a great plumber. I know a great residential designer. I know a great floor guy. We call him the floor guy. Painter, cabinets, countertops.
We've had Roofer. We've had Brian on the show as well. So some of these guys have been experts on our show as well. So, and I have to thank you for connecting us, because you are like this connector. And it's not just in the real estate world. Like, you've introduced me to a private investigator and a eye doctor. I mean, it's just, and we've been friends for so long. So it's just
I've known you longer than I know my husband.
Yeah. So, and it's so fun. I mean, we'll do a quick shout out to Joe Brower, because I invited him today. We all met kind of at the same time, and this is kind of like the original team back at when we met. Man, that was in 2004, 2006. I don't know. 7. Okay, good. Maybe that's better. That's better. Awesome. Text Jennifer to her Textify number, 713-554-0490. Get full access to her info, and she'll be happy to walk you through this. Well, let's jump into this, because it's so interesting. Real estate is changing, but how is the real estate market right now?
It's really good. And I know we're talking local, but we are very lucky to live in Houston, Texas. We had a small blip when COVID hit. It kind of stalled a little bit, but it's back and running like nothing's ever happened, which is amazing.
And it's amazing too, because we also had that ridiculous negative price on oil because there was just too much stock. And Houston is an oil town. So, I really thought it was going to affect more. It definitely affected mobility, right? Like, people were changing, and there's a little bit of an unknown.
Right.
But, what are some of the big changes that you're seeing? Like, the recovery, right, is you're saying it's almost unnoticeable, or what do you think it is noticeable? Where
there was just a small blip when we all first really didn't know what was going on, and we were hunkered down at home. But people, we've got open houses, we've got showings, I'm closing today, which is amazing. I've had 2 closings in the past 2 weeks, so that's great. It's moving. It's really coming along, and Houston's diversified a lot. So we've got medical and space and tech technical. So we're very well diversified in this city.
Yeah, and we have some big. What we don't have right now is we don't have those big sports, right? It's kind of they're coming back. Baseball's back,
Yeah.
right? But we're one of the only cities to have like everything. We have a professional basketball team, baseball team, football team. I don't know if the Arrows are still around, but we had a hockey team at one time, right? I mean, it's really like impressive to be able to have that many professional teams under one roof. You got something like Austin, zero professional teams. They just barely started I think they may have become, the Bolt may have become MLS. That's a
Hmm.
soccer team. But other than that, UT is known for, I mean, Austin's known for UT. I mean, I called it UT probably instead of Austin. I'm in the city of UT.
But people would know what that meant.
Exactly.
They'll
I'm
know.
wearing green because that's my favorite color. I stand out. Jennifer, what are the seller tips for a quick sale? People are interested in knowing, hey, is it a good market? What should I do?
Well, it's a buyer's market, so you have to be very strategic on how you sell your house. First of all, find a good agent that they will guide you through the whole process. What you first need to do is you need to depersonalize your home. You don't live there anymore. You are staging it for someone else to imagine themselves just walking in and feeling, oh my gosh, we can live here. This is our new home. So you need to take down personal pictures. You need to take down mementos that don't really add to the decor, and it can get sticky, but just think, be very objective, and your agent will tell you, a good agent will tell you what you need to take off the wall. So depersonalize. You do not live there anymore. Also declutter. Get stuff off the floor so it looks like you have the most possible floor space you can. Take stuff off the countertops. You want every surface as clear as possible so they can see how big this really is, what the space options are. And price it right. You need to price competitively. You may not make what you were going to make several years ago, but you need this off the market. A well-priced house will move if you declutter and depersonalize, but a good price is really important.
This is a great question from Kim Wilkie. Are there certain features that buyers are looking for in a house now more than in the past?
Well, the open floor plan is still very popular. You want to walk in and feel a great space. It's not so compartmentalized anymore. Also, the home office is even more important now since we're at home and working, and you
So
need a
that's
private
important,
space
right?
to make a
So
call or work.
we're talking about seller. So if you're a seller and you have a 3-bedroom, maybe turn one into an office if you're staging it,
Yeah,
right?
stage it. It's not that
Yeah.
hard to do. And if you don't have the furniture, you can rent it easily or you can borrow it from a friend. All you just need to do is make the appearance of an office, a desk, a chair, and I don't know if you need a small bookcase, but just something easy.
Yeah. And are you seeing any? I've seen like the double masters, right? Like adding bathrooms. Is that like? I mean, I imagine, especially now, COVID, washing your hand. I mean, do you think? Would you require a seller to say, "Hey, price it right," or put an extra bathroom to make sure that there's more bathrooms?
I wouldn't. It personally, if it's a good house, it's got solid bones and it's got good features, I would not reinvent the bathroom if it's up to date. Because once you do, it's gonna take a lot of time. It's gonna take a lot of money, and you never know what's gonna happen when you open up the walls. So just use what you have if it's updated and
So
clean.
true.
Yeah,
So true.
yeah.
Don't open it. If you don't know if it's an old house, don't open up the walls. And then like,
No.
oh, and don't move walls. Let the new homeowner do that.
Yeah.
Right. Now maybe get the plans if you think, but no. Here's a follow-up from Kim. She's saying, do you actually do staging as part of your service?
I know good stagers. I know some really good stagers that can transform the shape and the flow of your home and the color. And there's a lot of stuff you can do with what stuff you have. So it's not necessarily expensive. An empty house, they'll bring in the furniture. Or if you're living there, they'll suggest different pieces to trade in and out. But it makes such a huge difference. And if you're not in a home and you're trying to sell an empty home, you got to stage it. It will sell
Yeah.
faster. It will sell quicker because people want to visualize where they're going to put their stuff. Especially if you've got a weird room you've never known what to do with. Call a stager. They'll stage it for you.
And so I guess the question is, so you don't do the staging yourself, but you'll manage a stager. You'll bring a stager in,
Yeah.
turnkey.
I will
Great.
book them. I will meet them at the house and pay. I will facilitate the whole thing. So
Perfect. That's more just to understand better. Concierge means, hey, one phone call Jennifer. We used to call you JJ. I don't know if you still go by JJ.
Some do. You can call me
Uh,
JJ.
okay, call JJ and boom. Single family or duplex? Great question by Greg.
What do you mean?
What
What's
what do you
better?
think is the right? Yeah, like where's the smart money is in
Mm.
terms of buying?
Typically, a single family is always going to do better, just depending
Hmm.
on your neighborhood. But people, there's a psychological thing with sharing a wall with someone. So you'll notice even the new builds that are this far apart, they're still a single family home because you don't have that wall. That doesn't mean duplexes are impossible to sell. There's some darling ones around the town, but bang for buck, usually a single family will do better.
And what else should we be looking as a buyer? So you're saying this is kind of like a buyer's market, right?
Hmm.
So sellers, yes, we got to stage it. You got to make it sexy, make it price it right. What should we be looking at as a buyer?
Even though we're at home, location is still very important. Is it close to restaurants? Is it close to bars? Is it in a school, in a good school district? Um, is it on a quiet street versus a big busy street? So like location is still very important. Another thing to do, which I don't know if it's like a golden rule or written down, it's hard to describe, but go with your gut. Go, if you walk in and say nope, then walk out the door because this house isn't for you or this home isn't for you. Listen to what your gut is saying and listen to your wife because she'll know. She'll know
All
more.
right. This is a great loaded question. One of our experts, I'll totally call him out, Craig Levine. How are rates today? I wonder what Craig Levine does. What does Craig do, Jennifer?
Craig is a loan officer. He's one of the best mortgage people I've ever met, and he has jumbo loans. So if you're buying a big house, he's one of the few people that still is doing jumbo loans. The rates are great
Yes.
today. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're,
Talk to Craig. He's one of our experts as well. We'll put his expert number on the chat. Also, he can do anywhere in the United States. There's a lot of states he can do it, as long as they're not jumbo, though. They have to be below jumbo outside of Texas, but inside of Texas. And I'm sure you can tell us, Craig, post it on there. What are the rates?
put
I'll
it
put
in the
them on
notes.
there.
And he
But
always
yes,
says Houston is on sale. So I'm telling you, it's a good time to buy.
absolutely. So refinancing, we actually refinance, and the shameless
What do you
plug.
say?
I just had to put it. Shameless plug. We had to. We had to. Craig's been amazing. We'll actually link his video because the rates are super important, and he actually has like a university online that kind of walks you through it.
Yeah.
The great thing about having somebody like Jennifer or JJ is that she'll actually connect the pieces, right? If you're a buyer or seller, she'll not only get the contractors, but also connect you with people like Craig that can get you the right financing. And in fact, we just refinanced with Craig because the interest rates were so incredible. And it's a time to buy. It's a time to refinance or buy, and go through that. There's looking, what do I look for if I'm looking for an investment property, like areas, time, what should we look for?
Well, just remember, you don't want to sink a lot of money into an investment property. Usually, if you are buying an investment property, you're probably going to rent it. Now it's changed because people are buying, let's stick to investment properties. Investment properties, you're usually going to rent it. So you want something where people are going to rent it, like a workforce area, like near the port or Deer Park. You want somebody that's going to live there that can't necessarily afford a house. So you will have the long-term rental, but don't overspend. You don't want to do that. And location is still important. And you want something with minimal repairs, get a good inspection. Your realtor will help you inspect it because you do not want to be in there and putting a new roof on or dealing with the plumbing. You might have some minor repairs, but that goes along with any house you're going to buy.
Sure.
So you don't want to spend a lot of money on something you're like, oh, it's so pretty, but I'm going to have to fix all this stuff.
Right.
Don't. And you're not going to live there. You are not living there, so it doesn't have to be super fancy. It has to be clean and livable and presentable, but you're not living there, so you do not need high-end custom cabinets for a rental property. We don't need it. So,
Well, and here's an important tip that we discovered the hard way is Airbnb requires you to have certain permits.
oh yeah,
So if you're looking at Airbnb, go look at before you buy the property. As part of your inspection, you should actually ask for an open permit request. And if there's any open permits, look at what they are. Some of them are easy. Sometimes they pulled a permit and didn't do the work. But if you have open permits, you can't Airbnb it. So investment property, some people are thinking long-term, something short-term. And Jennifer, right now we were talking more about like workforce. We're probably talking like 1-year contracts, right? Easy, move-in ready properties. Airbnb tend to be, they tend to be like a little bit more like hey, this is in the location where people are visiting. You're probably gonna spend a little more time in it. But yeah, look under the hood, right? Because especially before you buy, because man, it is just brutal when you think you got something and done. And also look at the insurance.
Yep.
Ask for insurance rates. They vary all over the city, and I learned that also. The hard way. I moved my my home from the Woodlands to Houston, and that changed a lot of how things were registered and whatnot. Greg's asking, are you seeing outside of town investors coming to Houston or Texas? Are you seeing mostly people just kind of investing from Houston in Houston?
Well, it's all pre-COVID. So I'm on a real estate committee at the Greater Houston Partnership, and we were actively talking to companies who are moving to Texas. Tesla just came to Austin because it's a great place to live. I'm sorry they didn't come to Houston, but people are moving to Texas. It's warm. The cost of living is really good.
Right.
So yes, people are coming. They're still coming. So.
And we're also seeing movement out from the city.
Yep.
To the suburbias, right? So what are some of the hot areas you think are going to be growing more and more? Because now potentially for more of the remote working, educated population, if they can work remote, where do you think are the big areas to move into in Houston?
Well, that's a great point because it's funny. Mark and I were talking. My husband, I'm like, let's get a second house so we can buy a lake, so we can drive and go spend the time in another house. This is a great time to do that because prices are good, interest rates are low. Like Lake Conroe is exploding. There's a nice town there. There's a lake. It's close. You don't have to go very far just to get a change of scenery. So it is a good time to buy that second home if you can do it.
Yeah, and I mean, and man, the Airbnb market is actually like still holding up. I've got plenty of clients that are doing Airbnb, especially when they're in remote areas. Like Airbnb downtown, not the same thing. But if you do have like a house out on a lake, if you can do a weekly rentals and you do 1 week, that might pay for the mortgage for the month. So do the math.
Yeah,
yes.
But be careful because some complexes are very strict about Airbnb. So before you buy, have your agent look into that, because if that's your plan and then you buy it and you can't do that because the HOA says no, then that kind of defeats the purpose. You need to be educated going in if you're going to plan to do that.
HOA and deed restrictions. Tell people what HOA is, because a lot of first-time buyers won't know what an HOA is.
An HOA was kind of like a governing party of a specific neighborhood. They've got a president, a VP, a secretary, and they were responsible for creating the rules, maintaining the rules of a neighborhood. Like, for instance, your setback line, which is how far you're from the street. And most neighborhoods have a setback line, so there's not all random houses, coming and going. So it's kind of like that, or what the architecture shape will be. And they're the governing party. Some are more strict than others. Some are mandatory. We live in Oak Forest, and ours is voluntary. They just want to make sure we kind of maintain the style of the neighborhood.
And a lot of them collect fees. It's the Homeowners Association. That's what HOA stands for.
Right.
They collect fees. And if you're out in Conroe, it may be $75 a year. But if like my HOA is about $300, almost $400 a month. Right. Yeah. And so, that's not, that doesn't go towards any principal or anything. It's an extra expense because they take care of the pool. They take care of like a lot of the outside communal elements. So yes, HOAs are great, but HOAs are also terrible. Kind of mix and match, what it is. And I think that's when you see a property, when it says no restrictions, right? Don't take it by, don't take the Craigslist posting for it, like
Oh, no.
read it,
You got to look it up. Make
look it
sure.
up. But that's
Yeah.
also an important, like, like, hey, if there's no restrictions, that means your neighbor can have a horse or like a farm or facility. So it could be great for you, but it could also be terrible for you. And like that brings us to our most important question: how important is it to have an agent?
Well, honestly, I think it's very important. They, if you have a good agent, their one and only responsibility is to protect you. To
Hmm.
protect you from things you don't think about, protect you from the HOA with weird laws, protect you that, things have stumbling blocks. You need someone to be your advocate. And you can't
Hmm.
necessarily do that because you're caught in the weeds of, oh my God, we're buying or selling. And there's a lot of
It's a
stuff
little bit of
going on.
shock.
Yeah, well, the homeowners have a lot of responsibility too. So let the agent take care of that. Let the agent be your advocate. That is the one. Yes, concierge services are great. It's an extra bonus, but I'm here to protect you. I'm
Hmm.
putting my best interest and sorry, that's wrong. Your best interest first. That's the one and
Right.
only, that's the most important thing. And you can't
No,
do
and
that if you're
it's
caught in the weeds. Hmm?
well, and you know what to look for, right? Like you walk in, and if there's something that looks awkward, I mean, I've seen, we should probably even post these. There's a couple of websites saying like, good thing I had a realtor," or like things like that. Well, good thing I got an inspection,
Yep.
because people will do things they'll put lipstick on the pig just to sell it.
Yep.
Right. And so just because you walk in and it looks clean, if you don't look under the counters, I mean, termite inspections, like there's things that can really, really sink you in. I actually didn't buy a property once because of a deed restriction.
Yep. So it's important
And
to know those.
and
Yeah.
the HOA wouldn't lift the deed restriction. Right. The deed restriction said that only a white Caucasian family could purchase the house,
Mm.
and it's in River Oaks. And I was like, what? And my realtor was like, well, like they're not enforceable because of blah blah blah. I'm like, okay. I mean, it's an ancient deed restriction. Well, the board is meeting. I just said have them sign a document, and they didn't want to sign it. The board wouldn't sign a document that they wouldn't enforce it. I'm like,
Mm.
well,
Wow.
you know what? I'm moving on. And so look at, and another great point. I'm seeing somebody on the chat actually on LinkedIn. So now it's interesting. We can see who's chatting from Facebook and on LinkedIn,
Oh, cool. I
but
love
I
LinkedIn.
couldn't post it. So they're saying, what are some really, what are important factors, right, in terms of your inspection? Like what are the biggest highlights to look for in an inspection?
Okay, so even if you're buying a new house, a new build, get an inspector and your agent can help you do that. And some are better than others. I will only use one person as an inspector because I've seen the other end of inspectors doing stuff for um, like buyers buying my client's home that have an inspection done. And anyway, I'll hook you up with my inspector. They need to look at the roof. They need to look at the foundation. Um, and keep in mind, an inspector they're not going to catch everything, but they'll catch the big things. This is outside visual look at what's going on in the structure of your house. They'll look in the attic, they can check the AC. They just will give you an overall guidance of what's really going on in this house. And we've walked away from things. They're like, no, we're not buying this house because there's so many problems with it and people aren't going to negotiate to fix it. And I'm
And
like,
I
this will
and I
be a
want to hear
bigger
that.
headache.
I
You
think
don't need this
that's really
headache.
powerful, right? To hear like, hey, a good realtor will tell you to walk away from the property, right?
Absolutely.
So that kind of brings us into like that next little space. It's like, what do you look for, or what do I look for in an agent? What does anybody look for in an agent, right? Like, how do we find when they can't get the best concierge realtor in town, or they're in a different city? What should they be looking for?
You need someone who is super responsive, who
Mhm.
puts your best interest at heart, and someone who's not in it for the money. If you've got an
Mhm.
agent chasing money, they're not putting your best interest at heart.
They're going to want
It's,
you to buy that house
yep,
instead of like the right house.
yep. They're going to say, oh, no, you can fix it. No problem. No problem. No, because
Level the house. It's fine.
yeah, you can fix it. Yeah, no. You need an agent that's really dedicated to putting their client's best interest at heart. That's what it boils
Mhm.
down to. And being responsive. I like someone who picks up the phone and or answers you right away. I think that's important too.
Yeah, and I still look at some referrals. Also, what kind of work do you get before hiring an agent, right? I mean, there's obviously an agreement, right, that you must sign with the agent and whatnot. But what kind of do you do any preliminary work? Like say, oh, like do you do an interview process? Do you show them some comps and like, or like how do you? Let's just say we're going to sell a house,
Mhm.
right? It's different to sell than to buy. So what should I expect an agent to bring to the table the day that we're talking about potentially hiring them?
Well, then I would meet the agent at the house. I know that's a little different now, but just put on your mask.
Hmm.
You can go to the house, and you really need an agent who will tell you the truth about your home and say you need
Hmm.
to do this, you need to do that, and you can be. There's diplomatic ways to do this. I had a seller one time that had a lot of stuff in the house, so I went through every room and I said, "Here's what." This is before I even got the client. I said, "Here's what you need to do in every room to sell this house."
Hmm.
And she just checked them off. It was great. So there's no question what needed to be done. It's a lot of work, but you need someone who's going to tell you the truth about what's going on
And
in
you
your
can,
house.
and that's important. So you can have somebody kind of like, hey, what would you do to this house? It's an interview process. It's a
Yep.
relationship process. So don't be
Hmm.
afraid of getting the realtor into your house and saying, hey, what would you do? Where would you ask them what they would list it out? If they have
Yeah.
some comps, is that pretty common before you execute?
Yeah, absolutely. You need to come in, and the agent needs to come in prepared and have done their homework. Like this is the neighborhood value.
Hmm.
What can you expect? How long will it be on the market? Just you want full disclosure because
Yeah.
you don't want any surprises. You
Well,
want
that's good, right?
yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that's important. We're going to put you on the chat later and we'll put like a little checklist of what a realtor should come with,
Okay.
right? Like, hey, here's some comps. Here's a little map of the area. Here's like recent, homes that sold, and then they should walk your house, right? Of course.
Hmm.
Um, and then if they start saying they should have a budget, right? Of you should have a budget for what you should be willing to put into the house, right? And how long is a typical contract with a realtor to sell a house before it auto renews or before you have to, go through the process? Is it just self renewing or is it like 3 months, 6 month, 1 year contracts?
Usually 6 months for normal, but if you've got a super priced high end, multi-million, 20 million, 30 million, whatever, 5
Hmm.
million, it's usually a year just
Okay.
because maybe those sit a little longer, but typically it's about 6.
That's great. That's good to know. Just be prepared. Kiv's got a great question. Is like people are always fearful of the appraisal process, right? I guess first of all, let's tell people what does that mean? What's the appraisal? Because I can go to HCAD and find out what the city appraised it for, but what's really the appraisal process?
Well, that's when somebody picked at random. People cannot choose their appraiser. They come, they look at the
Hmm.
house, they figure out what it's worth, what the market value is, what people will pay for it, not the tax value, but the market value.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know, maybe people are afraid that that's not going to appraise, that they're not going to get as much money, but you need to know this ahead of time because a lot of times there's a contingency in, if you're buying a house, a lot of buyers will say, well, if it's not going to appraise it what you're selling it for, then we get to renegotiate. So you need to have that frank conversation that it needs to be done and be done quickly. And it's part of the process. It's important to know.
So important, right? But should you get an appraisal to sell your house or to buy a house? Well, both. You got to get it to buy because that's how you get the financing. But to sell it, should you also get it appraised to list the property? Or is that what the comps are?
That's what the comps are. But if someone's really digging in their heels about how much this house is worth and how much they're going to sell it for, I suggest getting an appraisal. That'll save a lot of time in the end. So
Mhm.
they'll know what the house is really worth and what they're going to get for it. If they're way out of line, I
Right. Well, and
suggest getting appraisal.
here's where it gets tricky, right? And Craig Levine can probably jump
Is he
in.
still on?
Is I'm sure, yeah, I'm pretty sure he's still on. He's like, I love it. So if you're trying to sell for $1 million, easy numbers, $1 million, but it appraises at 800,000, Craig is not going to give you $1 million loan,
No.
right? Like he's a bank. He gives you money based on the fact that you put 20% on that 800,000. right? So you got to put that 20%. So you're only going to get like $750,000. That means you're out of pocket $250,000 if you want to buy the house, right? That's listed for $1 million. So as a buyer and a seller, the appraisal really makes a negotiation process of like, hey, you got to put cash in if you really want to buy it. Now, you can say it's not worth that all day long, but if a cash buyer comes in and buys it, that's what it's worth.
Right.
Right?
Cash talks.
Cash is still king, right?
Yep.
I have lost a negotiation because I was like, oh, I got him on the appraisal, and then somebody came in and paid, man, like 8% more than I was offering, and cash. I was like, I mean, 8% higher than the asking price and
Oh,
cash. I
wow.
was like, well, so it was definitely the seller knew it. They knew their
Good.
property was priced right. I was going with, I was playing the slow game, and I got caught.
Well, it wasn't your house then.
No, I was trying to buy it,
Oh,
right?
I
I was
know, but
trying to
it
buy it.
wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be. And that's actually
Yeah.
the other thing too, is like I like when you said like make sure that the agent is working in your favor. You want somebody that tells you no, this house isn't has or is open to you. You tell you all the negatives about the house. Hey, I know it's right outside of the neighborhood you really wanted to be in, right? I know it doesn't have, the two masters, or I know it doesn't have XYZ, but you can, like, you got to know the negatives more than the positives, because the positives, I mean, like, it's exciting. It's exciting to buy a house. It's probably one of the biggest purchases in many people's lives. It probably is.
Absolutely.
It's the single
Absolutely.
largest, so I think you're more of like concierge relationship manager slash realtor.
Psychologist.
Yeah, you become like a real big friend. Oh, this is awesome. Kim's giving you a shout out. That's what everybody
Aw.
needs, an agent like you,
Aw,
right?
that's
And
sweet.
we talked a little bit about it earlier, but tell us, more about like what are some of the real like the big challenges that you've dealt with as a concierge, right? What are other things can you help with?
Well, the question is, did your last agent call the floor guy and meet him at the house and let him in and let them do the work? That's what I do. So you never have to
Hmm.
change your schedule. And I think more than anything is that I take the stress away from the buyer or the seller, so they don't have to deal with it. I was working with someone. I'm like, don't worry. I'm working with someone out of state. I'm like, I've got this covered. You do your job and worry about getting yourself moved, and I will take care of all of this while you're away. And it's very satisfying for me because I'm really helping someone. I don't get paid extra for it. It's just part of what I offer, and I love it because it's so satisfying that somebody is happy and they're finding a new home or they're moving out of a home. um, so I just
Right.
started that to be helpful, and it's I've gotten good feedback on it.
No, absolutely. And then you keep helping them afterwards because you know the plumber. If something goes wrong, hey, there's the
Yep.
plumber. There's gonna be little things that you're gonna have to do to get your house ready. And sometimes you want to remodel it. Sometimes you want to do, big changes. Jennifer's there for that as well.
I'll share
Before
my
we do,
network. I'll share my network with you all day long.
before my favorite part of the show, your least favorite, tell us some of the hotspots. I don't know if we touched on that. What are some of the areas that you think are, because people are moving out into the suburbias? Like, what do you think is hotter around Houston? Are we talking Woodlands? Are we talking Katy? Are we talking Sure? Like, what do you think is um is going to be hot or is
Well,
hot?
Conroe's really hot for if you need to live on a lake.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Heights is always good. Oak Forest and
Hmm.
Garden Oaks is little known. Nobody. It's kind of like a hidden gem. I'm partial
Yep.
to it because that's where we live and it's close to in town. And you get big, beautiful trees with wide streets.
Right. You
over
get a
at
backyard.
over in the Goof, we call it. Um,
Hmm.
but it just there are all sorts of pockets. It just depends on what your lifestyle is, really. Just pick for your lifestyle.
Right. Great advice. My favorite part of the show: 3 things to do now. Go for it, Jennifer.
All right. It's a great time to buy. My friend Craig Levine, who is a loan officer, shameless plug, keeps saying Houston is on sale. And that means Houston, Conroe, everything's on sale. So it's a good time to buy. I also, there he is. Also, Houston will be okay. We're going to be fine. We're on the road to recovery. We're bouncing back very quickly. We live in a great spot. I know everybody's going to be jealous about Houston if they're watching this everywhere else. And the most important thing is stay safe and stay strong and wear a mask so we can get this over with. Wear a mask. So those are my 3 things.
Totally. Thank you for like bringing that up. Right.
And I don't want
It's
to get
like,
political. It's not political at all. Just wear a mask. So you're
yeah,
healthy. So you're healthy.
wash your hand. I mean, just like, you know what? Like we can get through this. Houston's gotten through much worse, right? And it just really does feel like a hurricane hit America, right? And but you know, the real estate market is an opportunity. It's also a little recession proof, and I think that's something we can talk about in the future. Is like you get a house, kind of like what Jennifer's talking about, an investment property, workforce area. You get a year-long tenant, right? The especially if they're in the space, you know, now we know what services are. What do they call it? The important services.
Essential.
Essential. There you go. So if they're in the essential business, they're gonna still have an income, right? And that means that you're still being able to service that loan. You'll be able to like maintain that property, and that's a long term investment. So, and I love the lake house. So invite us to the lake. We'll do a lake house expert 35 lake house edition.
That'd be fun. I'm up for that.
No, so timely. Jennifer, thank you so much for being on the show. If you want a concierge realtor, text Jennifer to the number on the screen, and you'll get access to the best in Houston. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. You're so sweet. Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Craig.
All right, guys, that was Jennifer Johnson, concierge realtor, talking about the real estate market, and so encouraging to see that. Yeah, we went through a blip, but like things are strong. Yes, the economy is still not where it needs to be, but the real estate market is an opportunity. Put your notes in there. We're going to put Jennifer on the notes to answer some of the questions, some of those check boxes, because we really did cover a lot of ground today. Join us next week. We're going to talk about opening up schools. We have an expert in opening up schools and coding and painting and how to like safeguard your property. Painting is one of the most important things you can do to protect your health inside and also protect your home from the outside. So join us on Expert 35, guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys soon.